Heath awakened through the supernatural extraction system and, with the help of the system, embarked on the path of becoming a wizard step by step, becoming a deity. Low strength, it's okay, the extraordinary system extracts attributes. Not enough talent, it's okay, the extraordinary system extracts talents. Bloodline garbage, it's okay, the extraordinary system extracts noble bloodlines. Everything can be extracted, extracting everything. Traditional wizard writing, cool writing, fast-paced, non-oppressive throughout the entire process, the protagonist's personality is decisive and decisive, without much emotional drama. Newcomer's new book, kneeling down for support. Keywords of the novel. Wizard. I can extract all things without pop-ups, wizard. I can extract all things. Download the complete text, wizard. I can extract the latest chapters of all things. Chapter 1001. Blood Rain Day, new book, seeking collection, seeking deduction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1001. Blood Rain Day, newcomer's new book, seeking collection, seeking recommendation, Grey Stone Castle, a confirmed Baron's castle on the east side of the Black Cloud Forest, belongs to the Norn family. Blood Rain Day. Women and children hide in the castle, and all men bring weapons and follow me up to the battlements. No one is allowed to retreat. Whoever steps back will have their head chopped off. The Thor Knight shouted, waving his cross sword. The castle was chaotic, with apprentice knights and sheltered farmers, all carrying swords, rakes, and pitchforks up the battlements under the drive of Thor Knights. The once every 3 years Blood Rain Day has arrived again, and every day on this day, the black cloud that envelopes the dark forest all day long will rain like blood. This kind of blood rain has a peculiar power, and demonized beasts living in the forest will go crazy and rush out of the forest to form a beast tide after being soaked in the blood rain. Therefore, at this time, everyone in the entire Grey Stone territory must enter the castle to resist the beast tide together. On the side of the battlements, there stand more than 10 young men, aged around 13.14, wearing leather armor with nails and carrying bright cross swords on their waists. These are all apprentice knights from Greystone Castle, core members of the Norn family. At this moment, Kira, with her linen hair, placed her right hand on Heath's black-haired shoulder and joked, "Hey, Heath, I saw you trembling. What's wrong? Are you afraid?" Heath glanced at him but didn't speak. He is indeed afraid, but there is nothing shameful about it. Anyone who grew up in a peaceful era may not be able to remain calm when they see such a scene. Heath is not from this world, he comes from a plane called Blue Star. He doesn't know how he got here either. He only remembers working overtime at the company 3 days ago and feeling too tired, so he slept on his desk for a while. However, upon waking up, he changed his world and identity, from a 30-year-old urban white-collar worker to a 13-year-old apprentice knight in Greystone Castle. Before he could fully familiarize himself with his new identity, Blood Rain Day arrived, and then he was driven up the battlements by the Thor Knight with a cross sword, and now it is. The Baron is here. We have 2 knights, Lord Baron and Knight Thor. Even high-level demonized beasts can defeat us, and we will definitely win. At this moment, there was a commotion in the crowd, and everyone's gaze aligned towards the stone steps. Over there, a middle-aged man in his 40s walked over, wearing a lock armor and a blue cloth cover, looking imposing. This is Baron Carter, the owner of this Grey Stone Castle. The appearance of Baron Carter caused a burst of enthusiastic cheers from the crowd on the battlements, and even the fear in Heath's eyes dissipated a lot. This is because in addition to his status as a lord, Baron Carter is also a genuine knight. Knights, this is the collective term for humans who possess powerful powers in this world and are also the ruling class of this world. They can improve their physical fitness to a level far beyond that of ordinary humans by practicing some special secret techniques, and any official level knight has extremely amazing combat power. Heath had witnessed Baron Carter effortlessly lift a boulder weighing at least a few hundred kilograms and split it in half with one sword. There are such powerful people, and there are still two, even on this damn bloody day, they should be able to pass safely, Heath comforted himself in his heart. The Baron and the Thor Knights adjusted the formation on the battlements and then led the team to wait on the side. Time passed by bit, about half an hour later, boom boom. Suddenly, a loud rumble came from the horizon. The black cloud floating above the forest suddenly spread outwards at an astonishing speed, instantly enveloping the entire forest and even the grey stone castle. Above the sky, there was a dark and overwhelming expanse. Dida. Dida. Immediately, the crisp sound of raindrops sounded. Rainwater descended from the dark clouds. This rain is red, like blood. Heath raised his hand and looked at the red liquid sliding off the back of his hand. What exactly is this thing? Isn't it really blood? It looks like blood, and even has a pungent fishy smell. Drip, extraordinary energy detected, extracted, and the extraordinary extraction system begins to activate. Just then, a cold voice rang out in Heath's mind. Heath was surprised. What? Is it because I am too nervous and have hallucinations? Just as he had this idea, the voice rang out again. Deity, the extraordinary extraction system has been activated successfully. Immediately after, Heath's eyes lit up, and a row of data lists appeared in front of him. Name: Heath Nolan. Attributes: Strength 1.1, Agility 1.3, Physical Fitness 0.9, Spirit 1.2, average for an average adult male is 1. Heath is overjoyed. It's really a system. As a guest from another world, Heath used to enjoy reading online novels, and of course, he couldn't have been unaware of what the system meant. Rumors have it that travelers must have a golden finger. I thought it was just a legend, but it turned out to be true. The crisis is imminent, and this golden finger has arrived at the right time. Heath quickly asked in his heart, what is your function of the extraordinary extraction system? An extraordinary extraction system can extract energy from all extraordinary substances to feed the host itself, including but not limited to attributes, skills, and knowledge. Usage conditions. 1. It must come into contact with the extract. 2. The extracted object must be an extraordinary substance, and 3. The extracted object cannot be a living organism. Heath was taken aback. Superordinary matter. What is considered extraordinary matter? Just as I was about to ask further, a commotion rang out from the battlements. Coming. The beast tide is coming. Oh my goodness. So much. But suddenly a thick layer of dust and smoke appeared in the distant forest, densely packed with demonized beasts. Groups of people come rolling in like a tide. The earth even began to tremble. Despite being mentally prepared, at this moment, everyone on the battlements couldn't help but take a breath of air, their faces turning pale involuntarily. Baron Carter walked to the front, drew his crossed sword, and said coldly, "Draw your sword, prepare for battle." As the battle approached, Heath could only put the system aside and drew his crossed sword to stand in line with other apprentice knights, silently watching the wave of beast strike. 100 meters, 50 meters, 10 meters. Next second, bang. There was a loud bang. Countless demonized beasts collided heavily on the city wall, and the thick wall visibly shook violently. The strong impact caused these demonized beasts to instantly transform into corpses and die under the city wall, and later the demonized beasts stepped on these corpses and collided with them higher up the city wall. The corpses piled up under the city wall, and soon reached a height equal to that of the battlements. The demonized beasts behind were also able to directly charge up the battlements. Battle, open the curtain. Kill. Baron Carter took the lead and slashed forward with a cross sword, only to hear a pop sound. The wild boar in front of him, which was over 3 meters tall, was actually split open by a sword. Kill. 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 The cold and solemn sound of killing sounded, and the morale of the people on the battlements was greatly shaken. They all picked up weapons and fought against these murderers. At the same time, Heath also welcomed his first battle in a different world. The one fighting him is a puppet rabbit. This kind of creature has nothing to do with cute pets on the blue star, and anyone who sees it will only think of terror. They look like a rough sewn low-quality cloth doll, with dense black threads growing on their skin, and their eyes are simply two buttons. Although they are about the same size as ordinary domestic rabbits, they possess extremely strong combat power, with sharp teeth and claws, and their movement speed is as fast as lightning. This is a unique species in this world, a demonized creature, rumored to have been transformed by wizards using black magic. Hoo-hoo. The cross sword slashed through the air and sounded the sound of breaking the wind. Heath waved his cross sword in his hand, and after intersecting with the paws of the puppet rabbit twice, he finally had the opportunity to strike the puppet rabbit with a sword. The defense of low-level demonized creatures is mostly comparable to that of ordinary animals. The sharp cross sword smoothly cuts through the fur of the puppet rabbit, and the rabbit, which has opened its belly and pierced its belly, wriggles on the ground like a disgusting bug for a while before stopping. Successfully winning the first kill in the other world, Heath's nervousness slightly eased. He wiped the blood off his face and prepared to run towards the next enemy. However, at this moment, the system's prompt suddenly sounded. "Deity, you have found that extraordinary substances can be extracted. Do you want to extract them?" Heath was taken aback and instinctively said, "Extract. Drip, please let the host touch this extraordinary substance." Extraordinary matter. Are you talking about a puppet rabbit? Guessing in his heart, Heath placed his hand on the body of the puppet rabbit. Suddenly, he felt a surge of energy surge from the puppet rabbit's body, and then it surged into his body through the palm of his hand, as if his body had become lighter. At the same time, the system's prompt sound rang again. Drip, extraction successful, agility plus 0.01. End of this chapter. Chapter 2002. Extraordinary Extraction System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2002. Extraordinary Extraction System. Can attributes be directly extracted? Heath felt extremely unbelievable. Before he could think it over, a burst of excitement came in his ear. Damn it, Heath, are you daydreaming? Are you daydreaming at such a time? Baron Carter shouted at Heath at the top of his throat. As he spoke, he swung his sword forward and killed a mid-level demonized beast, a two-headed dog, in front of him. The head that had been chopped off rolled over to Heath's heel without any bias. Deity, it has been discovered that extraordinary substances can be extracted. Should we extract them? Can I also extract what others have killed? Heath quickly reached out to touch the head and said, "Extract." Drip, extraction successful, agility plus 0.03. A warm current surged through the palm of his hand again towards Heath's body, and the strength seemed to have increased. It's really possible. Once again, the extraction confirmed that it was not an illusion just now, and for a moment, Heath couldn't help but be overjoyed. He looked around at the demonized beasts rushing up the city wall one after another and the corpses scattered all over the ground, and a surge of excitement surged in his heart. If we extract all of these, our own strength can also increase by a significant amount. At such times, there is nothing more secure than strength. Just think of it and do it. Heath fights while secretly extracting attributes from the remains of the demonized beasts. During this process, he also gained more understanding of the use of his golden fingers. Firstly, there is the type of attribute. A single demonized beast can only extract one attribute, and the type of attribute is more inclined towards the strengths of the demonized beast itself. Being good at strength makes it easier to extract strength attributes. Next is the level of attribute extraction, which depends on the strength of the demonized beast. The stronger the strength, the higher the attributes that the demonized beast can extract. At present, the extracted attributes mainly include strength, agility, and physique, and the remaining spiritual power has not been harvested yet. The blood rain has been pouring non-stop, and the fierce battle has been ongoing. And Heath also quickly shuttled around the battlefield, constantly improving himself through extraction. Deity, it has been discovered that extraordinary substances can be extracted. Should we extract them? Extract. Drip, extraction successful, power increased by 0.01. Drip, extraction successful, agility increased by 0.02. Drip, extraction successful, physical fitness increased by 0.01. With stronger strength, faster speed, and a more resilient body, Heath can feel his strength rapidly improving almost every minute and second. The other apprentice knights on the battlements felt that Heath today was very different from before, and his active performance made the apprentice knights look at him one after another. Even Baron Carter, who had previously roared at Heath, had his eyes lit up and he cast a series of eye-catching glances during the remaining battles. Roar! Just then, a deafening roar rang out in the distance. A giant beast appeared in the animal tide, which was a giant bear over 5 meters tall, standing on the ground like a small mountain. Everyone gasped for air when they saw this giant beast. Copper-skinned giant bear. Advanced demonized beast copper-skinned giant bear. This is not true. A commotion suddenly erupted in the crowd, making it difficult for anyone to remain calm in front of such a behemoth. Baron Carter knew that a castle in a chaotic formation would be dangerous, so he quickly said to the Thor knight over there, "Thor, hold your ground and leave this damn beast to me." After speaking, he swung his sword over a wild boar that was blocking the way and ran straight towards the giant beast. As he ran, a faint milky white glow suddenly surged out of his body, and it was visible to the naked eye that the Baron's muscles became even more twisted, naturally releasing a powerful aura from all over his body. Seeing this radiance, the eyes of the apprentice knights suddenly became fanatical. Because behind this radiance lies the lifelong goal that every apprentice knight pursues. The power of life. Trainee knights can form a seed of life within their bodies through continuous training and improvement. Once activated, this seed of life can possess extremely powerful power. And condensing the seed of life is also considered an advanced official knight. Barons will win. Kill. 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 Above the battlements came a thunderous drum roar. With the support of the crowd, Baron Carter also engaged in a confrontation with the bronze bear charging onto the battlements. Ding ding ding. The cross sword bombarded the giant bear's copper skin with a clanking sound of metal clashing, and the blade slashed through the copper skin, splattering large sparks. The copper-skinned giant bear, as its name suggests, has a strong exterior that is as hard as copper and iron. In addition, it also possesses extremely powerful power that can easily tear humans in half. Such a giant beast is not something ordinary people can resist, but if it were a knight, the situation would be different. As the top species in the food chain, knights possess strength no less than that of giant bears, superior agility, and an equally resilient body. Even copper-clad giant bears are difficult to match. And as a result, after a few minutes of entanglement, Baron Carter gradually gained the upper hand, pulling out wounds on the copper-skinned giant bear with his outstanding agility advantage. Although these wounds are not yet fatal, they also make the copper-skinned giant bear bleed profusely, and defeat seems to be a matter of time. Barons will win. Take down this monster. The morale of Grey Stone Castle was greatly shaken, and the cries of killing echoed throughout. Looking at the battlefield of life and death over there, Heath felt an inexplicable surge of excitement in his heart. Can human power reach such a level? Although it is a giant beast like a small mountain, it is now completely suppressed and beaten by the tiny humans. Every swing of the sword seems to tear apart the wind, and its momentum is like a rainbow. No wonder these knights can live so carefree and nourished with such power. A desire surged in Heath's eyes. At the same time, the previous battles have also reached a white-hot stage. With the blessing of life force, the copper-skinned giant bear was quickly beaten to pieces and blood surged like a pillar. Under the stimulation of this pain, its crazy eyes seemed to have regained clarity, revealing a sense of fear. After another confrontation ended, it didn't charge forward anymore, but instead recoiled backwards, seeming to be running away. "Baron, it's going to escape." Baron Carter let out a soft snort, clearly not ready to let go of the giant beast. With one thrust on his legs, he shot straight at the copper bear like a projectile, raising his crossed sword, ready to deliver a fatal blow to the beast. However, just now, a fierce look appeared in the eyes of the copper-skinned giant bear, who was afraid of escaping. Faced with the attacking baron, its huge bare mouth opened and a large mouthful of blood spurted out in an instant. This blood and water came very suddenly, and Baron Carter, who was caught off guard, was instantly blurred in his vision, causing confusion in his grasp of bodily sensation. "Damn it!" The Baron exclaimed in his heart that something was amiss. Before he could get out of his predicament, the copper bear stepped forward and raised its paw, slapping the Baron's head. This hit him hard, and even a knight would surely die. "Baron, be careful." Everyone was shocked. At the moment of life and death, the Baron gritted his teeth and the seed of life erupted to the extreme, instantly elevating his senses to another level. With this keen perception, he quickly regained control of the battle and leaned aside. The copper bear's paws rubbed against his head and patted the Baron's shoulder. Although it was a fatal blow, the grab also struck the Baron hard, and everyone heard a clear sound of bone fractures. The Baron opened his mouth and spewed out a mouthful of blood. However, the Baron was also a ruthless person. While seriously injured, he also took advantage of the opportunity for the giant bear to open its middle door and swung his crossed sword to strike the chest of the copper-skinned giant bear. Bang! There was a loud bang. The Baron and the bronze bear both flew backwards, as if they had ended up in a situation where both sides were injured. "Baron!" The Baron smashed onto the wall on one side, and the Knight Thor rushed up to check the situation. On the other side, the copper-skinned giant bear also smashed onto the wall on the other side. This beast's vitality was extremely amazing, and even after being hit so hard, it did not die and stood up at the first time. However, the Baron's sword just now still caused great trauma to it, and even a cut was made in his chest, revealing the beating heart inside. Roar! The giant bear let out a roar and charged down the battlements with its four hooves flying together, as if it was about to escape. Although everyone could see that this giant beast was at the end of its strength, they still felt fear in the face of this huge creature. Faced with the rushing giant bear, they all dodged on both sides, and no one dared to intercept it. As the giant bear was about to escape, it was just then. With a whoosh. Suddenly, a figure came from the side and appeared in front of the giant bear. "It's Heath." The giant bear, eager to escape, was not prepared to entangle, but casually lifted its giant palm and slapped Heath directly on the head. But with this casual palm, it still possessed a powerful force, and Heath could even hear the cries piercing through the air, cold and cruel. The sound made his heart beat faster, saliva kept secreting, and hormones exploded in his body. But he still suppressed the urge to escape, trying to calm himself down, his eyes fixed on the palm, his body lowered, his head lowered, and his giant palm flew past his scalp, almost lifting his skull open. After the giant palm, the middle door of the giant bear opened. Heath roared in his heart. "Die for me." At the same time, he raised his crossed sword and stabbed the beating heart with a sword. With a pop sound, the crossed sword pierced through the wound that the Baron had split open, stabbing the beating heart. The fragile heart instantly exploded outward, and blood sprayed Heath's face. The giant bear's massive body gave a sudden jolt, like a dead machine, and with a loud roar, it fell heavily to the ground. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, thick breathing sounded. Heath wiped the blood on his face, and his eyes were crazy. Exciting, really his mother exciting. After calming his mind for a moment, he walked forward and placed one hand on the huge body of the bear, silently reciting to himself. Extract. An unprecedented surge of energy rushed into Heath's body in an instant, and in just one moment, Heath felt an incredibly powerful force. Drip, successfully extracted, power plus 0.3. End of this chapter. Chapter 3003. Blood of Gold. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3003. Blood of Gold. This force lasted for a while before calming down. Gripping his palm, Heath clearly felt that his strength had increased significantly in that moment. Undoubtedly a high-level demonized beast. The highest attributes extracted earlier are all less than 0.1, and most of them are even 2 decimal places. However, this copper-skinned giant bear contributed 0.3 to Heath with just 1, which is equivalent to dozens of them before. If we keep extracting like this, even if we advance to knights, it won't take long. Heath greedily thought. Fight. Fight. Kill. 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 The battle is still ongoing. The Baron was seriously injured and was carried down by his servant to rest. The next battle was commanded by the knight Thor. A knight was damaged on the side of Grey Stone Castle, but fortunately, there were no more high-level demonized beasts in the following, and only medium and low-level ones, with a limited threat coefficient. Under the leadership of the Thor Knights, everyone relied on the city walls to defend and block wave after wave of attacks. The battle continued for about 2 hours, and the blood rain in the sky gradually subsided. At the same time, the black cloud drifting above began to rapidly shrink inward, eventually returning to its former form, floating in small pieces above the enchanted forest. The blood rain completely stopped, and the beast tide abruptly came to an end. The demonized beasts who had regained their consciousness walked back to the forest. Ha! We won, we won. We have won. The crowd cheered. Heath inserted his cross sword back into its sheath and turned his head to look at the dark cloud above the forest, his eyes very curious. That doesn't seem like an ordinary cloud, not floating at an altitude of tens of thousands of meters, but floating just a few hundred meters above the forest, making it seem as if it's within reach. It is said that this dark cloud has existed in this forest since its inception. Every 3 years, it will rain blood like it does today, and then shrink back without drifting or dissipating. Legend has it that it is actually a demonized beast, raised here by a wizard. Who knows? Grey Stone Castle, study. Dong dong. The knocking on the door sounded. Come in. The door opened and the Thor Knight entered the room. The Baron is reading at his desk. Knight Thor bowed and spoke with concern. Baron, why did you get up? You should be lying in bed now to rest. Baron Carter's face was still slightly pale, and he coughed and said, Cough, just a small injury won't save the Lord of Grey Stone Castle's life. If I keep lying in bed, the Knights of White Wolf Castle will be much more fierce than the demonized beasts. The Thor Knight held his sword and said fiercely, If they dare to come, I will hang the heads of these dead dogs on the city wall. Baron Carter nodded in satisfaction and said, I believe the Knights of Greystone are the most outstanding knights in the valley, but going alone is not the work of the wise. We should have more companions. After a pause, he continued, These apprentice knights have been training in the castle for a year now. They have already proven their loyalty to me on the battlements. It's time to hand over the knight's secret scriptures to them. Let's find a chance. The Thor Knight nodded and said, Yes. Baron Carter continued, What do you think of the other black-haired boy? Among the apprentice knights, there was only one with black hair, and of course, the Thor Knight knew who Baron Carter was referring to. After pondering for a moment, he carefully commented, If it were before that, I would answer you as ordinary, but that child's performance before was indeed impressive. The Baron said, So, give him a bottle of golden blood. The Thor Knight was taken aback and said, The blood of gold. Is this reward too valuable? The Baron shook his head and said, "If it weren't for that child's bravery, our spoils of war would have one less advanced demonized beast. Brave people deserve recognition." The Thor Knight doubted him and said, "Yes." At the same time, on the side of Grey Stone Castle. On the open ground, there were several rows of wooden carts stacked with piles of demonized beast corpses. There were also more demonized beast corpses scattered around, all of which were left behind by this beast tide. They will be transported to nearby towns for sale, with some of the money exchanged to make up for the loss of the Grey Stone territory during this beast tide, while the rest will be rushed into the warehouse of the Grey Stone Castle. At this moment, Heath is transporting the bodies of demonized beasts from all over to the cart, organizing their bodies. This is a thankless job, and the apprentice knights are unwilling to participate, so he is the only one doing this job. And with this opportunity, he also ruthlessly brushed his attributes. Drip, extraction successful, power increased by 0.01. Drip, extraction successful, agility increased by 0.02. Drip, extraction successful, physical fitness increased by 0.01. After this beast tide, there were hundreds of demonized beast corpses left behind, and each one could extract attributes from them. In this round, Heath's three-dimensional attributes climbed at a rocket-like speed. By the time the last demonized beast was sorted out, its three-dimensional attributes had exceeded 2 points. What is this concept? You should know that after the battle, Heath summarized and organized the systematic information about knights in this world, and graded the 3 encirclement attributes of each class. According to the system classification data, if the average of the 3 individuals exceeds 2, it is equivalent to the level of professional special forces on Earth. Taking the novice knights present as an example, there may not be more than 5 who can reach this level. If training at normal intensity, adding so many attributes would require at least half a year of effort. Heath. Just then, a shout came from ahead. Kira ran over and said, "Thor Knight called everyone to the training ground. Are you okay on your end? If you're late and get punished, it'll be disastrous." The Thor Knight is known for his harshness. Heath nodded and said, "All right." Immediately, the 2 of them went all the way to the training ground. Although the 2 of them rushed over as soon as possible, it was still a bit late. When they arrived here, the apprentice knights had already lined up neatly, and the Thor Knight stood at the front, clearly waiting for them for a while. "Damn it!" Kira murmured and quickly ran up, bowing nervously, "Knight Sasha." Surprisingly, the usually strict Thor Knights did not punish them at all this time, but nodded slightly and said very casually, "Join the ranks." This couldn't help but surprise a group of apprentice knights who were gloating and waiting to see a good show. Isn't it? When did the Thor Knight become so talkative? Their murmurs soon fell into the ears of the Thor Knight, who immediately regained his former dignity. Quiet. The apprentice knights licked their tongues. There was a wooden box placed at the feet of the Thor Knight, who kicked it forward and said, "Today I'm calling you over because it means a baron. You have been in Grey Stone Castle for almost a year now, and you have mastered the basic knight training skills. After discussing, we feel it is time to give you something new." As he spoke, he kicked open the box. After opening the box, there were rolls of sheepskin scrolls inside. Thor Knight said, "This is the core secret of the Norn family, life chi, and the accompanying swordsmanship, moon cross sword. Brian, go and send it to everyone." The apprentice knights suddenly became fanatical in their eyes. The chi of life. Is the Baron going to teach us the chi of life? I'm not dreaming, am I? Thank you, Knight Thor. Thank you, Baron. Knight secrets are an indispensable part of becoming a knight. Only by practicing knight secrets can one condense life seeds and obtain knight-level power. And the knight secrets have always been in the hands of the nobility, and being able to cultivate knight secrets is the dream of every novice knight. Quickly, 2 scrolls were distributed to Heath. One was the knight's secret book, Life Chi, and the other was the supporting swordsmanship, Moon Cross Sword. Heath first picked up the aura of life and looked at it, which was filled with complex patterns and written explanations. He tried to understand it, but couldn't figure it out at all. I don't know if this can be extracted. Curiously thinking, he tried to use the extraction skill on the scroll. Drip, successful extraction, obtaining knowledge of chi of life. Suddenly, a strange message flooded into Heath's mind, and he felt his head swell. There was a lot of unfamiliar knowledge in his mind, which was related to the energy of life. Heath was amazed and said, "It's really possible." Now picking up the content on the scroll, he has easily understood it and knows the specific method of cultivation. If only I had the ability to learn a foreign language in the past. Heath was overjoyed. Immediately, he extracted another roll of the moon cross sword. Drip, successfully extracted, obtained swordsmanship, moon cross sword. Similarly, with a burst of swelling in his head, he had already mastered the swordsmanship of the moon cross sword. But the other apprentice knights were still frowning. What is all this written about? How should we start practicing? Isn't this too difficult? I can't even understand it. The Thor Knight said, "Take back the knight's secret script and supporting swordsmanship for now. I will provide a detailed explanation in 2 days and strive to teach you within a month. Don't worry." After a pause, he took out a small glass bottle from his pocket, which contained some golden liquid. He held the glass bottle and said, "This is the blood of gold." As soon as Thor's knight finished speaking, a commotion broke out in the crowd. What? The blood of gold? Isn't that a magical potion made by a legendary wizard using powerful magic? Does it really exist? It is said that it can directly enhance its strength. Is this true? Gold blood. It is rumored that a magical potion prepared by a wizard can directly enhance the knight's strength. The Thor Knight continued, "This is what the Baron asked me to bring, to reward the outstanding apprentice knights." The apprentice knights turned red in their eyes and even their breathing became cramped. Everyone speculated, who would be so lucky? The Thor Knight did not make everyone wait for long, but quickly announced a name in front of everyone's attention. He spoke up and said, "Heath." End of this chapter. Chapter 4004. Attacks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4004. Attacks. Heath was a bit surprised, but he quickly walked forward. Thor Knight said, "The Baron is very satisfied with your outstanding performance on the battlements. This is a reward for you. Keep working hard and strive to advance to knighthood as soon as possible." Heath took the blood of gold and said, "Yes." The apprentice knights were envious. The Thor Knight snorted lightly and said, "What are you looking at? If you want it, go and strive for it yourself. The Baron never hesitates to have excellent apprentice knights. As long as you are excellent enough, there is a chance to obtain the blood of gold." The apprentice knights said with full confidence, "Yes." In a blink of time, 3 months quickly passed. Magic the forest, somewhere. Whoosh! Whoosh! The crisp sound of breaking the wind sounded, and a young man with a long bow was chasing a petrified wild boar. As he galloped through the forest, Heath arched a long bow and strung it in one go. With a sound of shudder, the arrow shot towards the petrified wild boar. The cold sound of arrows alerted the petrified wild boar, and its fur suddenly tightened. The surface of its skin immediately presented a layer of grayish-white substance resembling a stone, and the entire wild boar seemed to transform into a stone sculpture. This is the ability of a petrified wild boar, which can tighten its fur in case of danger and temporarily gain defense comparable to that of a stone. The arrow hit the skin of the petrified wild boar with a click, and the arrow snapped in two, seemingly unable to break through its defense. Seeing this, Heath couldn't help but snort coldly and drew his bow and string again. After pulling the bowstring to a full moon this time, he did not rush to shoot, but instead clenched the bowstring and continued to aim at the petrified wild boar. At the same time, a faint silver-white radiance surged from its surface and quickly rushed along its palm towards the bowstring in its hand. Any apprentice knight present can definitely recognize the meaning of this radiance at a glance, which is the power that all apprentice knights dream of, night. Shoo! The cold arrow sound exploded again, but it was several times sharper than before. The arrow pulled out a visible cold light in the air and shot towards the petrified wild boar ahead. Although the petrified wild boar had its fur tightened and petrified for the first time, the arrow wrapped in white radiance still tore open its fur and plunged it into the flesh and blood. With a loud bang, the petrified wild boar, weighing over 100 pounds, was unexpectedly lifted from the ground by this arrow and smashed heavily into the grass ahead like a shell. Heath caught up and quickly saw the body of the petrified wild boar, which had a big hole in its chest and was completely silent. It's truly a knight-level power. Heath nodded with satisfaction as he watched the injury. For these 3 months, he basically hunted in the enchanted forest every day and enhanced his attributes by extracting skills. After 3 months of uninterrupted effort, I finally successfully condensed the seed of life into my body yesterday evening and became a genuine knight. Put one hand on the petrified wild boar and Heath said, "Extract." Drip, extraction successful, physical fitness increased by 0.01. The current attributes of the host are Strength 5.1, Agility 5.3, Physique 5.0, and Spirit 1.2. If the average circumference exceeds 5 points, it is a symbol of knighthood. Don't think it's easy. Let's take the apprentice knights who entered Grey Stone Castle at the same time as him. Among them, the most talented and hardworking currently has an average of no more than 3 points in the 3 sides. Carrying the petrified wild boar, Heath turned around and walked back. Even demonized beasts could be used to sell for money. Sha. Just then, a faint rustling sound came. The bushes in front suddenly shook. At the same time, Heath suddenly felt a sense of danger, and he quickly threw away the wild boar while jumping to the side to avoid it. Shoo! Almost as he made way, a sharp gust of wind broke out, and an arrow flew out of the bushes, brushing his head and flying to one side, almost lifting his skull. A slightly unexpected chuckle echoed from the bushes. "Oh, kid's reaction is good." Immediately after, a figure emerged from the bushes. A male, around 20 years old, was short and dressed in black leather armor, with a white wolf head emblem embroidered on his chest. "Barton, damn it, didn't you say you wanted to catch him alive? You almost shot him in the head with an arrow." Another voice rang out. A figure once again emerged from the bushes, this time a burly man holding a double-edged giant axe. He is also wearing black leather armor and also embroidered with a white wolf head emblem on his chest. Heath frowned and asked coldly, "You are from White Wolf Castle? You have trespassed into my territory of Grey Stone Castle without permission. Are you trying to provoke war?" White Wolf Castle is another noble territory in the valley, adjacent to Grey Stone Castle. The relationship between the two sides has never been good, and this time it was very unpleasant due to the ownership of a newly discovered limestone mine on the border. The two of them were clearly not prepared to conceal their identities. After hearing Heath's questioning, the short man drew his crossed sword and provocatively said, "Ha, so what? What? Do you cowards from Grey Stone Castle still dare to resist?" The burly man next to him grabbed the giant axe and cursed, "Why talk so much to him? Hurry up and cut off his hands and feet to take him back. The little bitch I just caught is still waiting for me to do it. Don't waste your time here." Heath sneered, "Kill me. It depends on whether you have that ability." After speaking, he didn't hesitate and drew his crossed sword, launching an attack forward first. The burly man burst out laughing and said, "Just in time." After speaking, he swung his double-edged axe and swung it forward from top to bottom. The giant axe was 1.5 meters long and weighed at least 100 pounds. With the strong man's swing, the air seemed to explode, and even a wild boar would be split in half with this axe. However, in the face of this terrifying blow, Heath did not avoid it and swung his sword forward, as if he was about to compete for strength. A hint of ridicule couldn't help but appear on the face of the burly and strong man, as he had never lost the power competition within his rank. The next second, two weapons collided in the air. Dang! The sound of metal interweaving echoed like a gong. The burly man's smile stiffened directly on his face. This is because between the two attacks, he only felt a huge force rushing towards him like a mountain and a sea, causing him to feel numb and almost unable to escape. Dang! 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 The burly man stepped back more than 10 steps in a row with a thud. The little man said in amazement, "Clive, what the fuck are you doing? Didn't you say you wouldn't play?" The burly man shook his hand and exclaimed in disbelief, "That kid has a lot of strength." The thin and small man's face added a sense of solemnity, and Clive's strength was clear to him. Even among novice knights, he was at a top level, and his strength was his strong point, almost comparable to that of a formal knight. Now even he has lost in a head-on competition, which is enough to show that the apprentice knight in front of him is extraordinary. When did Grey Stone Castle have another genius? Guessing in his heart, he drew his crossed sword and stood behind Heath's side, sandwiched with Clive. He said gloomily, "Genius. I just love slaughtering geniuses." The battle is once again unfolding. Dang! 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 The sound of metal clashing exploded in the forest, and large sparks shot out in the air. Despite facing one enemy and two enemies, Heath did not fall behind at all. His crossed sword pulled out cold lights in the air, making it difficult for the two of them to lift their heads. After more than 10 rounds of entanglement, Heath caught a flaw in the speed of the burly man and directly cut off half of his head with a sword. The remaining skinny man's hair exploded upon seeing this, showing no signs of war and running away without even thinking about turning around. Heath did not pursue either, but picked up the long bow still on the ground, drew the bow and strung it, and then shot an arrow out. Shoo! With a piercing sound of breaking the wind, sharp arrows flashed through the air, only to hear a pop sound, and the arrow pierced out from the thin man's chest. Looking down at the faint silver glow covering the arrow, the thin man's eyes were full of confusion and unwillingness. "Riders," he opened his mouth, spewed out a mouthful of blood, and then fell to the ground, following in the footsteps of his companions. Heath wiped the blood splattered on his face and walked forward. "I don't know if humans can extract it," he guessed in his heart and placed his hand on the corpse of the strong man, silently reciting. Extract. Drip, extraction successful, power increased by 0.1. Drip, extract white wolf fighting art. Drip, extract white wolf battle chi. Heath's eyes lit up and he said, "It's really possible." He even extracted so much at once. It goes without saying that the strength has increased by 0.1 directly, and even obtained 2 treasures. White wolf fighting art and white wolf fighting chi. You should know, this is the secret to training knights in White Wolf Castle and the biggest capital for the Bane family to establish themselves in the valley. Immediately, Heath extracted another small figure, but this time only received a 0. 1 agility bonus. It seems that repetitive knowledge cannot be obtained again. Shaking his head, Heath withdrew his thoughts and his gaze continued to fall on the 2 corpses. Let's study it later and get these 2 guys' heads back to the castle first. End of this chapter. Chapter 5005. War, Seeking Recommendation, Seeking Collection, Seeking Support. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5005. War, Seeking Recommendation, Seeking Collection, Seeking Support. After bringing the 2 corpses back to the castle, Heath realized that the 2 apprentice knights he had killed were still quite famous in White Wolf Castle and were expected to advance to the level of knights within 1 or 2 years. At this moment, Grey Stone Castle immediately exploded into a pot. Butcher Clive. Dwarf Barton. Heath killed both of them alone. Oh my God, is this too fierce? Didn't I hear that both of them are about to advance to knights? The apprentice knights were amazed, including Baron Carter and Knight Thor, who were also stunned for a while. Because he was worried that his too fast promotion speed would cause unnecessary trouble, Heath did not disclose his promotion to the knights to anyone. Even now, people still only think he is a trainee knight. Baron Carter came to his senses and exclaimed in surprise, "You did all this alone, Heath." Heath nodded and said, "They underestimated the enemy excessively." Baron Carter said, "Even if the enemy's arrogance has left a loophole, being able to defeat them with one or two shows your strength." After a pause, he said confidently, "I think your strength is not much worse than that of the knights. It is very likely that you will advance within a year, and even faster." Wow, if he advances to the knights within a year, doesn't that mean he only trained for 2 years before advancing to the knights? I've trained for 2 years and then advanced to knights. I've never heard of such a genius in the entire kingdom of Rodan, have I? The efficacy of the blood of gold is really terrifying. The crowd was once again noisy. Baron Carter looked at Heath with increasing satisfaction. At this moment, he suddenly saw a small gap on Heath's cross sword and couldn't help but say, "Is your cross sword broken?" Heath said, "It was left behind during the battle." The power of that double-edged giant axe is indeed impressive. Even though he can gain the upper hand in a tough encounter, his weapon can't bear it anymore. Baron Carter immediately took off his cross sword and handed it over. "This black dragon will belong to you from now on." The apprentice knights were all envious. Baron Carter's sword, the Black Dragon, was tailor-made by a famous blacksmith master in the valley for Baron Carter. It is made of the highest grade material, refined steel, and has been following Baron Carter for many years. It is a very famous sword. Heath was also polite, taking the cross sword and expressing gratitude. The Baron nodded and said, "You don't have to be polite. The warriors who have defended the dignity and safety of Greystone Castle should be rewarded. This is what you deserve, child." After a pause, he continued, "All right, everyone go back to training. I have something to discuss with the Thor Knight." The apprentice knights left one after another. After the crowd dispersed, Knight Carter's face darkened. He looked at the 2 corpses on the ground and sneered, "These dead dogs in White Wolf Castle are really stubborn. It seems impossible to make peace with them. This is not the first time today has been like this. Recently, the towns under the jurisdiction of Greystone Castle have been repeatedly attacked by the people of White Wolf Castle. Previously, a little girl accidentally stepped into the territory of White Wolf Castle while picking mushrooms, and was taken back by them and brutally slaughtered. A little girl who was only 12 years old was abused by more than a dozen men, and in the end, she was cooked in a pot and sent to Greystone Burger. The Thor Knight was equally angry and said, "They are just provoking. Why don't the Baron let me take 2 people to White Wolf Town and kill him in the dark?" The Baron shook his head and said, "No. There is only one town under the jurisdiction of White Wolf Castle, making defense easy. And there are 3 towns under the jurisdiction of Greystone Castle, which are simply impossible to defend against. Such mutual retaliation will only result in him losing out." The Baron said, "What they want is a war. Since that's the case, then I'll give them a war. Arrange someone to bring me a message to Hall and Brew, and also prepare the apprentice knights." Hall and Brew were the other 2 knights under the Baron's command, who usually stayed in the farm bestowed upon them by the Baron and only called them into the castle in case of major circumstances. After a pause, he said decisively, "Let's go to the battle book." Half a month later, the verdict was made on the plain. The judgment plain is a plain in the central part of a valley. Whenever there is an irreconcilable conflict between 2 families in the valley, they lead their family knights here to resolve it through war. At this moment, 2 phalanxes have been erected on the plain of judgment. On the left side are the people of Greystone Castle, led by Baron Carter and his 3 knights, followed by dozens of apprentice knights, and then a team of hundreds of civilians and farmers. Standing opposite is the team from White Wolf Castle, which is significantly fewer in number than on the side of Grey Stone Castle, but we cannot take it lightly because they have a total of 5 knights. Baron Carter sneered, "Fergus, this cunning fox, can be found everywhere. I'll just say how these little milk dogs in White Wolf Castle suddenly have the courage to take my battle letter. It's really Fergus, this old fox. There are only 3 knights in White Wolf Castle, and the 2 additional ones now come from another noble family in the valley, the Fergus family." The 2 additional knights immediately caused a commotion on the side of White Wolf Castle. Kira, standing next to Heath, cursed, "These shameless bastards of the Byrne family, even invite foreign aid for the sacred war. Did White Wolf Castle package all the women and sell them to the Ferguson family? How could they be so actively helping them, taking out all the only 2 knights? Miscellaneous. The war in this world is about playing with high-end combat power, and a formal level knight can already influence the outcome of such a large-scale war." In the crowd, Heath held the cross sword and frowned. He himself has little interest in war, glory, or anything else, but as a trainee knight at Greystone Castle, he had to come, otherwise the entire valley and even the entire kingdom of Roden would have no place for him. First ensure your own safety, then let's take advantage of the opportunity to get lost. Heath silently decided that although Baron Carter treated him fairly well, it was still far from reaching the level of sacrificing his life for him. On the plane of judgment, some people and horses came one after another. However, the number of these people and horses is not large, with only about 3 to 5 or 10 of them. They did not intend to participate in the war when they arrived, but instead stood on one side of the plain. These are nobles from the valley who come here as witnesses to the war. Soon, the agreed time for the war arrived at noon. The Baron walked towards the formation, and the Lord of White Wolf Castle also walked over. In addition, an elderly nobleman also emerged from the noble group. This is the final mediation. If the mediation is successful, war can be avoided, otherwise it is to speak with a cross sword. And obviously, this mediation failed. The Baron walked back to his position and said to everyone in an incredulous tone, "These bastards of the Byrne family are not prepared to pay a copper coin for Ellie's death. They also demand that each town offer 15 virgins, and in addition, let their knights come to the town once a month for entertainment." After a pause, he angrily said, "Tell me, what is your answer?" The crowd turned red and said, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" Baron Carter drew his cross sword, raised it high, and angrily said, "It's time to defend our dignity. Brothers of the Grey Stone Collar, follow me." End of this chapter. Chapter 6006. Charge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6006. Charge. Kill me. Go ahead. The shouting of killing is deafening, and war is on the verge of breaking out. Both sides rush towards each other at this moment, knights and apprentice knights holding high cross swords, while commoners and farmers wielded various weapons such as hoes, rakes, and pitchforks. 100 meters, 50 meters, 10 meters. Both sides can already see each other's red eyes. Next second, bang. With a loud bang, 2 waves of people and horses collided like a torrent. The farmers who approached the main formation were the first to suffer, being swept over and killed on the spot by the knights from both sides. Their forks, rakes, and sharp cross swords were as fragile as paper. After clearing the obstacles, there will be a real confrontation between each other. Knights to knights, apprentice knights to apprentice knights, farmers to farmers. This is an unwritten rule in a sacred war, where knights will not take the initiative to slaughter apprentice knights. Similarly, apprentice knights cannot take the initiative to run to the war zones of farmers, and can only fight against evenly matched opponents. If someone does not abide by the rules, even if they win the war, they will be despised and not tolerated by the entire aristocratic class of the kingdom of Rodan. Ding ding ding. The sound of metal interweaving rang out. The cross sword in Heath's hand was repeatedly swung and entangled with the enemy in front of him. Due to the constraints of the rules of war, the ones who are currently fighting him are naturally some novice knights. With his knightly level strength, he is like a tiger entering a flock in this battle circle. If he puts all his strength into it, he can easily cut a large area. But he did not do so, but carefully concealed his strength, and even pretended to be trapped in a fierce battle. As the saying goes, this war has nothing to do with him. It is impossible for him to sacrifice his life. Are you the black-haired genius who defeated the butcher and the dwarf? Just then, a contemptuous voice sounded. A trainee knight from White Wolf Castle challenged Heath and said, "Indeed, he's just a kid who stepped on dog poop luck. With your level, you can also be called a genius. This is a very famous genius in White Wolf Castle, named Andrew. At the age of only 17, he had already reached the level of a probationary knight, and there are rumors outside that he may become the youngest knight in White Wolf Castle." Heath had a heart to pick an opponent and gradually moved away from the battlefield. When he came to provoke him, he immediately fought back without giving up, saying, "Genius doesn't know, but slaughtering your dog is more than enough." Andrew exclaimed angrily, Okay. I want to see what you arrogant kid can do. Get out of the way, this kid belongs to me." Andrew, who held his talent in arrogance, immediately attacked Heath with his sword, and Heath did not dodge at all. He swung his sword and fought with him. And the apprentice knights around did not intervene in the battle between the two, they all stepped aside and quickly cleared a dedicated battle circle for the two. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Heath pretended to be powerless and fought while retreating, trying to move towards the outside of the battlefield as much as possible. It was too close to the center of the battlefield and too dangerous. Andrew didn't know Heath's thoughts, and when he saw him running away, he thought he was being discouraged. He foolishly chased after him and arrogantly said, "Little trash, can you run away?" Heath sneered, "Do you want to run even if you're slaughtering dogs?" The two fought together again. At the same time, the war has reached a white-hot stage. The farmers were exhausted, falling to the ground one by one, but ordinary people themselves didn't have much strength. Of course, strength is a factor, but the reason they lost so quickly was mainly because, like Heath, they didn't have much focus on war. War belongs to the nobility, and one's own life belongs to oneself. That's about it. If we win, will it be a serf losing or a serf losing? It's unreasonable to put one's life in it, isn't it? Not only serfs, but also apprentice knights may seem dangerous, but in fact, they are also playing with caution, defending 9 and attacking 1. It is still the knightly class who can truly be considered as a life and death struggle, as their victory or defeat determines the ownership of castles, farms, and women. They can only be considered a real war here. At this moment, the war in the Knight's Circle is divided into two parts. One is Baron Carter's circle, and he is currently facing the siege of 3 knights. Another is Baron Byrne from White Wolf City, who, along with one of his knights, fought against the 3 knights of Greystone Castle. The outcome of the war is destined to be determined between these two circles. A White Wolf knight shouted sternly at Baron Carter, "Carter, surrender. Hand over the Greystone mine and leave one hand behind. We promise not to trouble you." Baron Carter laughed and said, "Ha ha ha. Just because you little dogs want my Carter's head." Another knight from the Fergus family said coldly, Newman Knight, there's no need to talk nonsense to him. Are the 3 of us still afraid that he might run away when we hit him? Just chop off his head as soon as possible." The remaining knight said, "Knight Roya is right. Since Carter has arrived today, don't think of going out alive." The attack of the 3 suddenly became fierce. Several of them were knights, all of whom were on par in strength. In these 3-to-1 situations, Baron Carter quickly fell into a disadvantage and even had several wounds pulled out of his body. It was inevitable to see the Baron's defeat, but at that moment, a strange glow suddenly flashed around his neck. Although it was only a moment, it was still seen by the Roar Knights of the Fergus family. He suddenly shook his body and his vigilance increased in his heart, saying, "That's it." At the same time, Heath on the outside of the battle circle suddenly felt a strong aura coming from Baron Carter's side. He instinctively looked over there, but his pupils suddenly shrank. However, Baron Carter suddenly felt like a different person, with an extremely strong aura erupting all over his body. A milky white airflow, like milk, surged out of his body surface. Under the nourishment of this milky white airflow, the wounds on Knight Carter's body were quickly healed at a visible speed to the naked eye. In this milky white airflow, there is also a golden glow mixed in. The knights around were greatly surprised, and a noun blurted out. Grand Knights. The Grand Knight is another class above the knights, and this milky white airflow is a manifestation of fully activated life force, which is something only Grand Knights can do. And that strand of gold is also a manifestation of the sublimation of the unique power of the Grand Knight. Without any hesitation, the three knights immediately said, "Run." The three of them instantly fled in three directions. The gap between the Grand Knight and the knight is just like the gap between the knight and the farmer, which is an improvement in strength, speed, and life in all aspects. The knight has no chance of winning in front of the Grand Knight, only the chance of being slaughtered. "Can you run?" Baron Carter gave a cold smile as if he had transformed into a hurricane, catching up with the Knights of White Wolf City in an instant. His cross sword swung forward, and from a distance of 3 to 5 meters, a substantial sword aura appeared. The sword energy was like frost, quickly slashing at the White Wolf Knight, only to hear a scream. The White Wolf Knight's body was cut in half directly. The Baron kept walking and once again caught up with the second knight, using the same method to unleash another sword energy. This time, the sword energy was noticeably dimmer than before, but still a deep visible bone wound was pulled out on the knight's back, and his internal organs were torn apart, causing him to fall to the ground and convulsing, making it impossible for him to survive. The Baron relentlessly caught up with the foreign aid from the Fergus family and once again unleashed a sword aura. Having learned from the previous experiences of the first two companions, the Knight of Loya became more guarded early in the morning and quickly swung his sword to resist the Baron's attack. Dang! The sound of metal interweaving rang out, and the Knight Roya felt as if he had been heavily hit by a speeding carriage. He flew out and hit the ground hard, his bones falling apart. One sword did not die, and the Baron continued to chase after him, ready to catch up with another sword. However, just now those three swords seemed to have exhausted all his strength. He had just raised the cross sword, but his arm involuntarily shook, and his body shook before he knelt down on one knee with the cross sword. The frightened Knight Roya quickly stood up and glanced at the seemingly turbulent Baron over there, but he didn't have the courage to attack. Instead, he dragged his injured body out. This scene fell in Heath's eyes. He couldn't help but brighten his eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 7007. Cunning, seeking recommendation, seeking collection, seeking support. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7007. Cunning, seeking recommendation, seeking collection, seeking support. There is no reason not to take away the merits brought to your door. With a slight calculation in his heart, Heath quickly made a decision. He immediately changed his previous style of only defending and not attacking, and swung several swords at Andrew in front of him. Andrew, who had always thought he had the upper hand, was taken aback. Under Heath's sudden and fierce attack, he almost failed, and finally managed to dodge with all his might. Looking at the crack in his clothes, he couldn't help but burst into a cold sweat. He couldn't help but say, if it weren't for his quick reaction, he would have almost been ambushed by this kid. He would definitely have used such despicable means to kill the butcher dwarf. Little did they know that the reason he survived was simply because Heath was not planning to kill him, he just wanted to push him back. After forcing Andrew back, Heath didn't hesitate and turned around to chase in the direction of the Knight Roya. Andrew hesitated for a moment, then chased over with a gloomy expression on his face. He came to participate in this war to make contributions and fame, but now he hasn't received a single head because he chose the goal of Heath, so there's no reason to let him go. Andrew gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, let me cut you into pieces and feed them to the dog." The two of them chased after each other and quickly entered the forest ahead. Heath chased towards the depths of the forest, with bloodstains all over the ground, making it very easy to track. Chasing all the way to an open space, Heath stopped in his tracks. Through the sparse shrubs, it was obvious that a figure lay inside, which was the Knight Roya covered in blood. The Knight Roya also discovered the people outside the bushes for the first time. He exclaimed in shock, "Who?" Speaking with caution, he grasped the cross sword tightly. Heath walked through the bushes and into the open space, introducing himself, Heath Noon, the apprentice knight of Grey Castle. Upon hearing that he was a novice knight and a young face, the guard on the Knight Roya relaxed halfway. He said impatiently in a cold voice, "Get lost." Heath didn't waste his time either, he raised his cross sword and waved his hand. Knight Roya was taken aback, thinking that something was wrong with his eyes. "What is this apprentice knight doing? He wants to challenge me." Knight Roya said, "Is it up to you?" Heath said, "I want to give it a try." The Knight Roya laughed back in anger and said, Okay. Greedy kid, you want my head to become famous, right? If you have the ability, come and take it." During the conversation, he stood up and casually held the cross sword with one hand, standing at his feet. It's both contempt, and even more confidence. Knights have confidence in novice knights. Duh. Footsteps rang out, and Heath, with his cross swords in his hands, charged towards the Knight Roya. The Knight Roya's eyes lit up. He has a standard posture and a stable lower body, making him an excellent trainee knight. But always just a novice knight. The Knight of Loya wielded his sword with one hand and waved it upwards casually. Dang! The cold metal interweaving sound rang out, and Heath's body shook. He flew backwards and hit the tree trunk heavily. The Knight Roya said coldly, "Get out of here. He has injuries on his body, and he doesn't want to dwell too much." Heath stood up again in pain. He hesitated for a moment, but did not leave. Instead, he raised his cross sword again and said, "I want to try again." Knight Roya sneered, "I don't know what to do." Duh. Footsteps sounded. Heath charged towards the Knight Roya again. With a bang. Heath was once again thrown away by the casually swung sword of the Knight Roya, and this time he fell even further. The Knight Roya didn't even glance at Heath and simply sat down again against the trunk, completely relaxing his guard. It can already be confirmed that this is a probationary knight, and only a probationary knight. Knights are invincible to novice knights. Hoo, Heath stood up again, his breathing noticeably becoming louder. He stared closely at the direction of the Knight Roya, and the greed in his eyes had been replaced by solemnity. He hesitated for a while, seeming to have struggled a lot before finally lifting his sword again. Roya Knight snorted lightly through his nostrils and said, "Looking for death." Duh. The footsteps rang out again. 30 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. The Knight Roya grabbed his sword tightly and prepared to completely solve this ignorant apprentice knight once and for all. But just then, suddenly, a silver-white glow burst forth in front of the Knight Roya. The Knight Roya's pupils suddenly shrank and his head exploded with a bang. This as he quickly changed his parry posture by gripping his sword with both hands. However, the previous laxity left him unprepared, and temporary changes in tactics were no longer realistic. The ultimate result was whoosh. Like a phantom brushing past the body of the Knight Roya. Heath, wielding a sword in both hands, appeared several meters behind the Knight Roya. On the blade of the sword, blood dripped. The knight Roya widened his eyes, with an extra cut in his neck and blood gushing out. He opened his mouth and said in shock, anger, and unwillingness, "Rider." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his eyes and fell to the side. Hoo. Heath panted heavily, calming the tension in his heart. Although both sides are knights, there is no comparison between a new knight like him and a knight like Roya who has been promoted for many years. Even if the other party is injured, he has no confidence in winning. If it weren't for using tricks to make the other party take off their guard, he would definitely not have won. Despicable. Perhaps, as long as the goal can be achieved, Heath never mind the process and means. Moreover, Heath does not believe that a guy with a face of 3 can be much more noble than himself. Taking a moment to rest, Heath walked over and placed a hand on the knight Roya, silently reciting to himself. Extract. Drip, successful extraction, agility plus 0.5. Drip, extract rose swordsmanship. Drip, extract the rose encyclopedia. A surging force surged into Heath's body, and he felt his body suddenly become much lighter. 2 more messages appeared in his head. He truly deserves to be an official level knight. Heath was overjoyed. How much can the other 2 knights killed by the Baron contribute to themselves? Just as I was thinking, a strange noise suddenly came from ahead. Sha. Heath looked up and saw a figure standing outside the open space at some point. Andrew. At this moment, Andrew was standing motionless on the outside of the open space, clearly stunned. He was both shocked and puzzled. Is this the apprentice knight who was suppressed and beaten for hundreds of rounds just now? Is this the kid who is in danger under his own sword? Besides, he is more of a fear. How could he be a knight? How could it be a knight? For eyes intertwined, and Heath said, "Did you see all of it?" Andrew was extremely frightened in his heart, with only one thought in his mind, escape. Without any hesitation, he turned around and left. However, compared to knights, the speed of novice knights is simply too slow. After brushing, Andrew only felt a strong wind coming from the back seat, and then a swirling sensation came, making him feel like he had flown into high altitude. Below, the body that had lost its head fell to the ground. Heath withdrew his crossed sword and walked forward, using the usual technique to extract it. Drip, extraction successful, agility plus 0.05. Drip, extraction successful, knight talent plus 1, current knight talent is 5, rating. Medium. Heath widened his eyes. Can talent also be extracted? He opened his mouth and said, "This is too abnormal, isn't it? We have already signed the contract, so we need to invest as soon as possible." End of this chapter. Chapter 8008. Sword of Miracles, for collection and recommendation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8008. Sword of Miracles, for collection and recommendation. By the time Heath returned to the battlefield with his 2 heads, the war had already ended. All the knights on the side of White Wolf Castle, including Baron Byrne, were killed except for one foreign aide from the Fergus family who was subdued by the Thor Knights. On the other hand, the Hull Knights on the side of Grey Stone Castle were killed in the fierce counterattack of Baron Byrne, and the remaining knights were all injured, but they did not harm their lives. The most severely injured among them appears to be Baron Carter, who, for some reason, has no visible external injuries, but is extremely weak and even requires the assistance of a novice knight to barely stand. Is it related to the power of the Grand Knight that erupted before him? Heath secretly speculated. Heath, who returned to the battlefield with 2 heads, immediately caused a sensation. Knight. Heath killed a knight. And cut off his head. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Heath killed the knight. Heath killed the knight. Andrew, a renowned genius of the same age, goes without saying that Loya is a real knight. The apprentice knight killed the knight, which is like a myth. No bard can write like this. Baron Carter asked in surprise, "How did you do it, Heath?" Heath explained, "When I found him, he was almost exhausted." Upon hearing Heath's words, the eyes of the apprentice knights were extremely red. Killing a knight is such a great feat, and this kind of luck is beyond words. Baron Carter was skeptical. Reason told him that his previous sword was already at the end of a strong crossbow, and its power should not be so great. However, besides this reason, he could not think of any reason why the apprentice knight could kill the knight. It should be luck combined with a little surprise attack. Thinking this way, Baron Carter smiled and said, "Ha ha ha, you're really a lucky kid who always creates miracles. Miracle kid, miracle sword. Sword of miracle. Sword of miracle." The crowd cheered. This war undoubtedly came to an end with the victory of Ashstone Castle. After the war, Baron Carter split the White Wolf collar into two parts. Part of it is the original territory of the White Wolf clan, which is inherited by a daughter of Baron Bane. He is exactly 13 years old and has reached the legal age of marriage in the Kingdom of Rodan. He will be married to the Knight of Thor. The rest of the territory is the dowry brought by Baroness Byrne, which belongs to Baroness Byrne in legal principle. However, she will marry the son of Knight Hall. Baron Carter the final real rule. Baron Bane's sons were all executed, and all of his daughters, except for those who were married, were rewarded. There were countless other rewards, big and small, ranging from knights, novice knights, and even serfs, all of whom received rewards. This world is like this, where the victorious have absolute control over the defeated. In a true sense, winning beauty and wine, losing nothing. A few days later, it was night, Greystone Castle, and Heath's residence. The apprentice knight originally lived in a collective dormitory, but due to Heath's outstanding performance, Baron Carter specially arranged a room for him after the war, located on the second floor of the castle, facing the enchanted forest. The room was not very large, but it had a separate bathroom and a bathtub for bathing, which made Heath very satisfied. Zizi, the sheep-fat candle was burning brightly. Heath was sitting at the desk, with several books placed in front of him, all of which he had borrowed from his study. Deity, successfully extracted, obtained knowledge of a general history of the Yak continent. Drip, successful extraction, obtaining knowledge of the Yak continent geography guide. Deity, successfully extracted, obtained knowledge from selected works of the Lords of the Kingdom of Rodan. Drip, extraction successful. These books have been of great help to Heath. The original owner of this body had a very low understanding of this world, and even didn't quite understand how much his own kingdom was. By extracting these books, he can also be considered to have a vague understanding of the world he has traveled through. Firstly, the land where he is located is called Yak Continent. It is said to be a continent, but in fact, the geographical range is roughly the area of the British Peninsula on the Blue Star. However, it seems that there is even broader land overseas, and perhaps this is also a peninsula. The social form here is similar to that of the Middle Ages in Western Europe, with a development process between the 13th and 15th centuries, with slight differences depending on the region. Dong dong dong. Just then, a knocking sound came from outside the door. Heath walked forward and opened the door. Outside the door, stood a young girl wearing a black and white maid dress, holding a sheep-fat candle in one hand and a bowl of hot milk in the other. "I haven't seen it before, it seems like a new maid from the castle." She timidly said, "Your Highness, I'll bring you milk." Heath nodded and opened the door, pointing to the desk. "Put it there," he said after speaking. He returned to his desk and continued reading on his own. The girl walked over and placed the milk on the desk, but she didn't leave. Instead, she stood by the side of the desk. Heath raised his eyebrows and looked up. "Is there anything else?" The girl hesitated for a moment, completely unexpected, and suddenly took off her maid's skirt. She was wearing nothing inside, and as soon as she took off her maid dress, she stood naked in front of Heath. Heath was stunned for a moment. The girl's cheeks were red and she said nervously, "Your Highness, Baron. Order me to be your personal maid." Clothes maids, that's a nice phrase. In fact, their main job is to sleep with them, and to put it bluntly, it's a tool for nobles to vent their desires. Heath looked at the girl with great interest, and then he remembered that a few days ago the Baron had indeed mentioned to him that he would arrange someone to take care of his food, drink, and daily life. At that time, I didn't pay much attention, and I didn't expect that the Baron's care actually meant this. He asked, "What's your name?" The girl said, "Alyssa, Alyssa Byrne, sir." Heath was taken aback and said, "Byrne. Is Baron Byrne yours?" The girl said, "My father." Heath suddenly realized. Baron Bane has a total of 3 legitimate daughters, one married out and the other married to the Knight of Thor. This should be the remaining one. I heard that this was not born to the Baroness, but to Baron Byrne and a dancer lover. However, the dancer was too beautiful and could please the Baron. Baron Byrne was amused for a moment and gave the girl a proper name. This incident caused quite a stir at the time, and the Baroness, in anger, even peeled off the skin of the dancer's lover. It is common for nobles in this world to raise lovers, but proving it to illegitimate children is another matter. After all, legally speaking, illegitimate children who have been given proper names have the right to inherit. However, at this moment, the white wolf collar has been divided up, and the inheritance rights of Eliza are optional. It is indeed appropriate for the Baron to use her as a reward to win him over. After all, this is the legitimate daughter of an aristocrat. If it were for a naive apprentice knight, she would have to wholeheartedly sacrifice her life for the Baron from now on. By clarifying his thoughts, he no longer hesitated. Looking up, Heath looked up and down at the girl in front of him. Her mother's ability to captivate Baron White Wolf is enough to prove that her appearance is indescribable, and Eliza, who inherited her mother's genes, is also impeccable in this regard. The skin is as fair as snow, as if it can be broken by a blow, making people want to take a bite. Her face is oval-shaped and her features are small. She was originally born with a baby face, and she is not very old, making her look quite cute. In absolute contrast to her youthful appearance, her figure is tall and round, with a truly childlike appearance. Heath couldn't help but ask, "How old are you?" Eliza replied, 15, sir. I really can't tell at all. Such a proud body, even some adult women would be overshadowed. With a sigh in his heart, Heath began to ponder. Since the Baron sent her to be his personal maid, this reward is something he cannot change, and he must accept it or not. This kind of girl is sent to men for leisure and boring cultivation. In other words, it is for doing. Her ability to stand here and take off her clothes indicates that she has already prepared herself to become a man. So the question is, do we adhere to the core socialist values? Or do we follow the customs when in Rome? End of this chapter. Chapter 9009. I accept. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9009. I accept. After some thought, Heath decided to temporarily suppress his physiological impulses. This is not to say how noble he is, but simply that he feels too young. It's not that the girl is too young, it's that he is too young. To be honest, he is only 13 years and 6 months old now, just beginning to mature. This age group is the golden period of physical development. If one accepts this matter too early, they are worried that it will affect the normal development of the body, and therefore regret it for life. Even if it's hard to endure hunger and thirst, it will take 1 or 2 years for the body to mature before we can talk about it. Anyway, since this Eliza has already been given to her as a personal maid, it is her personal property, so there is no need to rush at this moment. Everything still prioritizes development and strength enhancement. Thinking this way, Heath set aside his distractions. He spoke up and said, "Put your clothes on." Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Eliza's face turned pale. She immediately knelt in front of Heath, grabbed his knee, and pleaded with red eyes, "Please, sir, take Eliza. Eliza will be very well behaved. No matter what you ask Eliza to do, don't drive her away. Eliza will serve you with care. Eliza's identity is very sensitive, and giving her as a gift to Heath can only be said to be just right for her, and if it is returned, there must be only one way to be executed. After all, no one wants to see someone one day use the name Eliza to avenge Baron Bane and compete for the inheritance of the White Wolf territory. Heath can certainly understand this. He lifted half of Eliza's cheek and said, "You misunderstood. I just asked you to dress up and didn't mean to drive you away." After a pause, he bluntly explained, "I'm still too young and don't want to spend my energy on these things. I'll wait for 2 years. Eliza breathed a sigh of relief and quickly stood up, saying, "Yes, yes." After a pause, she couldn't help but feel troubled again and said, "What can Eliza do for you, sir? The purpose of being a close maid here is to sleep with her. If she doesn't do this, Eliza doesn't even know what the point is of staying here. Laundry, cook, serve tea and water. These castle servants will handle it without her intervention, and she also doesn't believe that these jobs can be exchanged for her life." At this moment, Heath's mind had returned to the book, and he pointed to the bed without lifting his head. "Just help me warm the bed," he said half a month later, White Wolf Castle, wedding banquet. When things are urgent, they take power, when things are delayed, they change. After determining the strategic policy of annexing White Wolf Castle, Baron Carter quickly began to prepare. The killing that needs to be killed, the appeasement that needs to be appeased, the solicitation that needs to be won over, and the transaction that needs to be made have completed the exchange of interests among all parties within a month, and have pushed the wedding of the Thor Knight to the forefront. At this moment, inside the wedding banquet hall, the smiling Thor Knight was entertaining guests, and next to him was his 13-year-old newlywed wife, standing together like a father and daughter more than a married couple. Sitting at a table, Heath savored the delicious food on the table. Occasionally, peers of similar age walked by, and at this moment, they always cast a few admiring gazes. Vaguely, whispers can still be heard. "Is this the miracle sword that defeated Andrew and killed the Knight Roya? It looks even younger than rumored, isn't it outrageous? I heard it was a surprise attack, right? Even if it's a surprise attack, it's amazing, okay? I heard he's not even 14 years old. If the rumors are true, it's too scary. This terrifying talent is probably enough to advance to knights at the age of 16. He looks quite handsome. I wonder if he has a lover." In the Battle of the Plains, Heath became famous. Now the entire valley knows that a young genius apprentice knight has emerged from Greystone Castle, who took the head of a formal knight before the age of 14. Listening to the whispers in his ear, Heath frowned and said, "Isn't it a bit too high profile? Mu Xiao is sure to crush Lin Feng. What he wants is to maximize the benefits without attracting attention, just take advantage of it. It doesn't matter if he doesn't make a name for himself. But then again, this is actually a false proposition. Since ancient times, fame and fortune have never been separated, and without fame, where does profit come from? I want to take advantage of it, but I don't want people to know where there are so many cheap things in the world. Forget it, just show off. In my previous life, I lived a tiring life like walking on thin ice and being careful. It's rare to live a new life with such big golden fingers. Isn't it good to live a carefree life? If you really have trouble coming to your door, just solve it." Having figured this out, Heath no longer hesitated and fully enjoyed the admiration of others. Da. Just then, a cramped sound of footsteps came. But more than 10 young people of the same age as Heath walked over and surrounded the table where Heath was, clearly indicating that the visitors were not kind. Several apprentice knights at the same table stood up nervously, grabbing the benches beside them. Weapons were not allowed at the wedding banquet, and all of their weapons were confiscated before entering. A young man with golden hair walked out of this group of young people. He glanced at the several grey stone castle apprentice knights by the table and questioned, "Who is Heath Noon?" Heath was taken aback for a moment, then put down half of the beef he had eaten and stood up. "That's me," he said. The blond boy took out a handkerchief and threw it directly at Heath, while angrily saying, "Duel, you despicable guy who sneaks on the sacred battlefield." Heath looked surprised and said, "Who is this guy? Who is that blonde-haired kid? He looks so arrogant, doesn't he know who he's challenging? You don't even know about him. That's Beck Ferguson from the Ferguson family, and the father of Roy Ferguson who was killed by Heath is his father." Upon hearing the comments of others, Heath suddenly realized that he was avenging his father. "But how do you feel that this revenge is a bit strange, and haven't we already agreed on it before?" After the end of the war, the aristocratic middleman arranged a mediation, including the eldest son of the knight Roya and Heath. After mediation by the middleman, both sides shook hands and made peace, agreeing to settle any past grievances. Heath recalled the smile on the face of the aristocratic youth, which didn't seem to be fake at all, but now what's going on? Actually, this is because Heath's intelligence is insufficient. The knight Roya has 2 sons, and the one in front of him is the youngest son. According to inheritance law, his position was originally ranked after his elder brother, but he had outstanding talent since childhood and was deeply loved by the Knights of Roya, even causing the Knights of Roya to have the idea of kicking out his brother and letting him inherit the farm. As the idea of the Roya knight grew stronger, it was already a matter of time before the succession order could be changed. Who knew that at this moment, Heath had killed the Roya knight? In his prime, the knight Roya had never made a will, and according to the Inheritance Act, his farm was naturally inherited by his eldest son, and Beck in front of him couldn't get a penny. The older brother greeted Heath with a smile, but the younger brother harbored a deep-seated hatred towards him, and that's why. Heath asked, "Can duels be held at other people's weddings? Although I haven't figured out where that strange feeling comes from, it's not in line with his style for others to criticize him without saying a word." After a pause, he picked up the handkerchief and threw it back, saying happily, "If possible, then I'll accept it." End of this chapter. Chapter 10:010. Talent Extraction, Seeking Recommendation, Seeking Collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10:010. Talent Extraction, Seeking Recommendation, Seeking Collection. According to the rules, as long as the owner agrees, this duel can be held. Baron Carter doesn't want to make things too embarrassing and be said to have killed them all, but he also doesn't want others to laugh at the cowards of Grey Stone Castle. After thinking for a moment, he found an excuse to smile at Beck and said, "He, of course a duel is possible, but son of the night, are you ready to fight against the gambling?" He casually took out a piece of parchment and wrote a promissory note. "Here are 100 gold coins. If you can win this duel, please feel free to come to Greystone Castle and exchange it with me at any time. If you lose, you also have to pay the same amount. So, are you ready for this money?" The monetary units in this world are divided into 3 types: gold, silver, and copper. 100 copper plates are equal to 1 silver coin, and 100 silver coins are equal to 1 gold coin. A typical family of 3 only spends a few gold coins a year, and the total annual output value of a farm is only a few dozen gold coins. Even Beck, who has not inherited the farm, naturally cannot afford this money. Just as a conflict was about to resolve, a voice rang out in the crowd. "I paid for the Beck Knight's bet." The Baron's smile stiffened. He turned his head and saw an old man with silver hair passing by. Baron Carter squinted his eyes and said, "Viscount Lester." "This is Viscount Lester, one of the 3 major families in the valley and a supporter of the Fergus family. The relationship between the two is equivalent to that between Baron Carter and Baron Saul." Baron Carter said with a smile on his face, "Are Viscount Lester sure he wants to come to this muddy water?" Viscount Lester appeared to be physically ill, with an unnatural black expression on his face. After hearing Baron Carter's inquiry, he coughed and replied, I just heard that there is a rare genius knight in our valley. I want to see if this is true to its name or if it's just a false name. Baron Carter said, you won't be disappointed. The duel kicked off with this. Everyone come to the side of the banquet hall and clear a piece of open space here. Heath and Beck walked into the open space and stood still, taking the 2 crossed swords sent by the servants. The crowd began to whisper. Who do you think they will win? It should be the miracle sword Heath, right? That was killed even by the knights. Forget it, that was a surprise attack, there's no telling how to do it. Beck has real skills. I also bet on Beck, it said that half of his foot has already stepped into the night. Heath is a new genius in the valley, but his opponent Beck is not weak at all. He has been famous in the valley for a long time and is even known as the first person under knights. If it weren't for this kind of thing, coupled with the strong support of Baron Roya's resources, Beck's promotion to knights within the year would definitely be a foregone conclusion. Finally, the bride representing the host family stepped forward to give a duel speech. I represent White Wolf Castle. In the same way as the eldest son of Knight Roya, the bride was also the beneficiary of this incident. Therefore, although her father died and she wanted to marry a middle-aged man of 40 years old, the little girl's mental state was still very good. My White Wolf Lord, Kelly Byrne, officially announces the start of the duel. With the bride's command, the battle began. A cramped sound of footsteps rang out, and Heath and Beck rushed towards each other for the first time. Dang! The crossed swords collided in the air, sounding like a gong. Like his father, Beck studied Ro's swordsmanship, which was renowned for its splendor in the kingdom of Rodan. But the silver moon cross used by Heath is also known for its grandeur, and it is imaginable what kind of scene the 2 of them would have in this fight. For a moment, everyone only saw sword lights flashing through the air, and the 2 crossed swords pulled out countless light and shadow in the air under the dance of their respective masters, ding ding. The crisp sound of metal clashing echoed incessantly, igniting large sparks in the air, like small fireworks exploding above a banquet. Very impressive. Is this the level of top apprentice knights? I thought I was just a little short compared to them. People were amazed. This high-intensity sword fight lasted for nearly 100 rounds, and Heath felt almost done. He took advantage of Beck's opportunity to expose his weaknesses and flew the opponent's crossed sword with 1 sword. After circling twice in the air, the crossed sword landed diagonally on the floor with a clang. Has the winner been determined? It's too sudden, isn't it? What a pity, Beck made a mistake. Yeah, neither side has done their best yet. Everyone thought that Beck was just caught by Heath due to a momentary mistake, and couldn't help but shout a pity. Even Beck himself believes the same. And as a result, he didn't admit his defeat immediately after his defeat, but instead said, "This game doesn't count, it was my mistake just now." He said he was going to pick up the cross sword. Zhang. The resounding sound of swords echoed. Heath raised his cross sword horizontally, and the sharp blade pointed straight at Beck's throat. If he moved forward a little further, he would have pierced his throat. Heath said coldly, "Winning is winning, losing is losing. The saying goes, where there is a mistake in a duel, start over." Not a single sword struck him, that's because today is the wedding day. If he doesn't know what to do, Heath doesn't mind sending him to see his father. Beck's smile stiffened. Baron Carter clapped his hands and said, "Hee, this is a very exciting duel. Both of you are excellent knights from our valley. Let's just treat it as a draw. What do you think, Viscount Lester?" Viscount Lester's face darkened for a moment, and he said with a smirk, "Your Highness, you're joking. Losing is losing, winning is winning. I can still afford 100 gold coins from Lester." Beck Ferguson lost. As he spoke, his gaze coldly swept over Beck. Under that cold gaze, Beck's face suddenly changed and he couldn't help but shudder for a moment. In fact, revenge is just language. Viscount Lester is the true mastermind of today's duel, with the aim of striking Baron Carter and undermining his authority. Beck is known as the first person under the knights. He thought it was a safe bet to face just a novice knight, but he never expected to lose. Unable to inherit the farm, Lester was already Beck's last chance to make a comeback. Regardless of how Lester would punish him, his chance of advancing to knighthood alone would become infinitely slim. Having talent alone is not enough for the knight's road. It also requires nutritious food, excellent weapons and armor, and countless resources to be piled up at every step of the Golden Blood Knight training. Without these resources, even the best talent is in vain. Unable to advance to knighthood, once his prime time is over, he will only be a trainee knight in his lifetime, and that's all for him. At this point, Beck's head exploded with a bang, feeling anxious. In a fit of anger, he immediately pulled out his crossed sword from the ground and roared, "It's all you damn bastard who caused me this." He set a sword and stabbed directly at Heath's back. Heath frowned and placed one hand on the hilt of his sword at his waist. "I was about to slay this annoying guy by the sword, but at that moment, someone took a step ahead of him." Zhang. The resounding sound of swords exploded. The crossed sword flashed in the air, piercing a hole in Beck's chest, and the overflowing sword energy tore his heart and lungs into pieces. Beck widened his eyes and lowered his head to look at his empty chest. He opened his mouth wide and said, "You." Before he could finish speaking, he fell to the ground with a thud, without a sound. The Baron inserted his crossed sword back into its sheath and said coldly, "You can't even abide by the most basic rules. If you don't admit defeat and still want to sneak an attack from behind, living like this will only bring shame to the nobility. Someone, lift him out." Heath volunteered, "Let me do it." As he spoke, he walked forward. He wants to take the opportunity to brush his attributes and also his talents. Don't think that having a system talent is not important, on the contrary, talent is extremely important and even irreplaceable. Blue Star has a saying that hard work determines the lower limit, talent determines the upper limit, which is also useful here. The extraction function of the system can only help Heath maximize his strength within his talent, and the level to which he can be promoted mainly depends on his talent. Taking the level of Grand Knight as an example, it is impossible for Heath to improve with his current talent. Once his attributes have increased to a certain level, he cannot further increase them. At this point, talent is needed. Heath grabbed Beck with one hand and muttered to himself, "System, extract." Drip, extraction successful, agility increased by 0.1. Drip, successful extraction, Knight talent +1, current Knight talent. 6, rating. Medium. Drip, successful extraction, Wizard talent +1, current Wizard talent. 1, rating. Low. Heath was taken aback. He can understand the attributes and knightly talents. This wizard's talent, what kind of ghost is it? End of this chapter.